Okay, this is pretty much part 3 of Triptychs. If you've missed part 1 and 2, the first part was looking at using Lightroom, second part was a basic version of Photoshop. This time I'm going to go into a few more different ways of doing it and get a little bit more complicated. There's some advantages and some disadvantages with this. Major disadvantages, it's more complicated. But yeah, we'll see as you go. Okay, so the first thing we're going to need to do, I've already imported all my photos into Photoshop, and at this point I haven't decided what my crop's going to be. I'm not entirely convinced what I'm doing with these images and how I'm going to process them. This is going to be a little bit more of a play. So, having said that and given you all due warning that it might be as boring as anything and you might want to go away, that's your call. Alright, we're going to increase the canvas size rather than shrinking it and cropping it this time, or shrinking the images. I'm going to increase this to 200% of the width and leave the height alone, and that's just going to give me some more blank space to work with. And before we start moving the photos themselves around, I'm going to create a layout that I happen to want for my triptychs to fit, rather than vice versa. So I'm going to create a layer and fill it with black, just so you can see what I'm doing. And I'm going to create a second layer, and then grab a triangle. Triangle? God crumbs, that's a rectangle. And I'm just going to draw use the rectangle tool to draw an approximate size that I'm going to want my holes, basically, where we're going to be able to see the images. Okay, so I've got one, and I'm going to fill it with white, and that makes life a little bit easier to see too. And then I'm going to, whoops, don't want to do that. I'm going to replicate or duplicate that layer. And the reason that I'm duplicating the layer is it means that I end up with an object that is exactly the same size each time. Otherwise you can end up, if you try and drag your rectangles multiple times, then you may find that they're just not quite exactly the size that you want. So that's 3 of them. I'm going to blend them together, so merge shapes, and then rasterize the layer, and that gets rid of the fact that it's they weren't actually real shapes, they were the computer doing the drawing. And then I can use this magic wand tool. I've got it set to point sample, and it's not contiguous, so when I click on one, it will select all of the white area there. The tolerance is set to 0, so I'm not going to get any feathering or anything on there. And now I can turn that layer off. Select that black layer that we had and go layer mask, and I want to reveal the selection. Whoops, no I don't. Undo that. I want to hide the selection. So layer mask and hide selection. There we go. So now we've got a little bit of our masks poking through. Now it's not quite right, because I've not managed to get it quite even, which is a bit naughty of me. So what I've done is unlocked this. It's going to leave the black piece of the image exactly where it is and just move the boxes, and until I'm reasonably happy that I've actually managed to get it even this time. So that's good. Now the next thing is looking at the layers and moving the layers themselves around. So obviously I can shrink, Control T, the image within there to fit into the frame. By the way, this is the World War II Battle of Britain Memorial in London, so it's yeah, interesting memorial. As I said, I hadn't decided what I'm going to do with the layout of this, but this is the nice thing about it, you can move the objects around. So that's 3, but they're not really working together as a triptych. Now I can move them, but you notice I'm moving this one across and I can't see it, and the reason I can't see it is this is how the layers operate in Photoshop. And the downside to this method, because this is the layer and it's underneath this one, I can't see, so I need to move this layer across, which isn't really working there, or I can move it right across, and that's, yeah, it's still not working as an idea yet. I don't know. This is the fun part of being able to play, and you can turn the layers off so you can see through. That potentially works. Let's just move this one across this way. Now if I can make that a little bit bigger, so Control T and enlarge. That's starting to work, although what I think I'll do is get really tricky and move this across here, and then move that face across there. Now I still want to see what's in that window, so this is where Photoshop comes in handy, in that we've already done layer masks. So we're going to do layer mask and reveal all on that layer, and then get a black brush, paintbrush, make it nice and big, make sure the edge is hard because I want it to paint straight over, and I can just paint out that edge. Now if I turn it all off, turn that layer off there, you can actually see where the paintbrush mark is, but because that's going to be hidden by this black line at the moment, it's not too much of a worry. And then you can keep playing around within Photoshop from here. I like where that one is, that's fine, but I think we might move the plane across. Now technically, according to the Nelson Triptych rules, this is not permissible because I've actually chopped one image in half rather than using three. In this case, if it was for club, it's not actually an issue because that rule doesn't apply to this particular week. But yeah, just be aware that that is that can be a curveball there. Okay, so that's it, and just save as you normally would, or in this case, the best option is export. Sorry, save for web, and we need the width is probably going to be our dominating factor. It's thinking. This is the problem with using 3 images and not resized. It does take the computer a while to work, and I'm going to pause this while it does, otherwise I'm going to bore you silly. As I was doing the about to export it, I realised that one thing I hadn't done was I've got a lot of negative space on either side of the image, so I think what I'll do is bring that in a bit and do the same from both sides, so that we end up with less negative space there. Still leave a little bit more at the bottom than the top, but just remove some of that negative space up here, and I'm going to hit apply. And again, I'm not going to delete the crop pixels, so if I decide that I don't like what I've just done, I can go back and keep playing and change it. So yep, okay, reasonably happy with that. File, save for web, and hit pause while it thinks. So in terms of size, we're going to save it as image size 1620 pixels wide, and that makes sure that our height is less than the 1080, and that's fine. It's small at the moment because it's only showing as 6.3%, but when I hit save, that's going to export it as a file that's the right size and good to go, get renamed and send into the competition secretary. Obviously at this point I'm not entirely happy with the image. I'll have another play when I'm not chatting to you guys and boring you silly, but the advantage of being able to do this is you can make those cutouts whatever size you want, and you can edit them as you go, and in fact once I close this down I'll show you another trick. Okay, so this can be quite nice for actually putting together a panorama or a triptych that isn't entirely even or isn't evenly balanced. If you wanted to make the gaps thinner, wider in there, and lose part of the this part of the image, you can select that on the layer mask, grab the paintbrush, and it's going to be white, and that will just cover that up. And obviously now it's totally unbalanced in that we've ended up with more of this side than the other. So for balance sake, I would go back and remove a similar amount from this side. In some ways it would be better to go right back to the beginning and make two rectangles that are exactly the same, because if you do this way, and Control D and removes that, you can see I've ended up with three at slightly different sizes, and it starts to look a little bit messy. If you go from one that's really small to medium to big, it can work as a triptych on its own. Now let's see whether or not we can play with it. Sorry, this is the downside of me mucking around while I'm busy trying to teach. I get distracted and start playing. So that's potential. Probably not in the end, but let's just see. So I'm going to make that one a little bit bigger and fill with white. So the white is going to cause it to... Oops, it's gone on there. Ah, joy, love it when it doesn't work. Oh, I've got white selected, I should have black, because black's going to reveal. Now this is where things start going wrong, because remember we'd cropped off part of that image. And that's there, so if we move that one underneath, then that image now is sitting at the top. This is where I should probably stop videoing, because it's going to bore the living daylights out of you. But anyway, you can always hit stop if you're getting really bored. That's almost working. I don't know. Yeah, I might come back to it later and have a play. But you hopefully get the idea that you don't have to then be restricted to specific ratios and sizes. You do have to be careful that little things like a very thin gap has sneaked through in that layer mask. So I'll grab a pen tool and make sure I've got the right colour selected. I want white because it's getting hidden. Sorry, white's getting revealed because I'm revealing that black. And that balances it back up again. Yeah, as I said, still not happy with the concept, but you get the idea at least that this allows you to make unusual shapes. They don't have to then be equal, and you can get away with doing your cropping later. So, as I warned you at the beginning, that was kind of an advanced one. If you look at it and go, oh, too much, that's fine. Head back to video 1 or 2 and stick with something that's a little bit easier. But hopefully for those of you who are just starting to get your head around Photoshop and wanting to be pushed a little bit more, that's given you a couple of ideas. Alright, catch you later.